Hi, I will be talking about the poems Vernal Equinox and Autumn, both by the poet Amy Lowell, and I will be talking about these poems regarding their use of tools that communicate sights and sounds to the reader. I'll also be talking about what these poems mean, and I will say whether I like them or not, quite honestly. Um, okay, to begin with vernal equinox, I just found out today in English class that vernal equinox is. Vernal equinox is the spring equinox, which is the day in spring when the night equals the day in length, I think. Um, okay, regardless of what that means, um, first of all, I'd like to talk about the images that the poet creates in this poem, the sights that she wants to communicate to the reader. First of all, the scent of hyacinths in the first line of the poem, I think actually that is an example of strong imagery because hyacinths have a very fragrant scent, and the scent of hyacinths, to me, that even presents um, not maybe a visual sensory image, but definitely a sensory image in that the scent of hyacinths can make several associations, especially related to spring. So I think that that is a good opening to this poem, especially because it is talking about spring, and hyacinths have that certain representation. Following that initial introduction, there is immediately a simile, the scent of hyacinths like a pale mist. Um, since a simile is a comparison using like, or as in this case using like, the scent of hyacinths are being compared to a pale mist. In fact, a pale mist that lies between me and my book, the poet says, and the imaginary sight that the mist is lying between her and her book, I think that creates a very interesting image because you can almost see the pale mist and how it's creating this half invisible barrier between the poet, and her book. So that whole introductory phrase, clause, sentence. I think it's full of imagery. It's full of not input, but sensory symbols, maybe sensory imagery, um, with the use of simile. And I don't know exactly what to call, like a pale mist lies between me and my book. Um, it maybe it's very strong imagery, I guess, because it's not personification, since I guess the mist really can lie between two objects, but there's something there that I think makes the writing very effective. Moving on, and the south wind washing through the room makes the candle quiver. Washing, we don't really, I don't really think of the south wind, the wind, as being something that can wash through a room. I guess if it's raining, if there's thunder, it can physically wash, but in this sense, I think washing gives a more wholesome picture of the wind just filling in the room and just sweeping through the walls, sweeping over everything in the room. I think that's what the poet is trying to communicate, and I think that creates another sight in this poem as well. The candle quivering, of course, that's a powerful image as well. Um, there's no device there. It's not a metaphor. It's not personification. But the candle quivering, it's just a very nice description of, I guess, the impact of the wind um, on the contents of the room. My nerves sting as spatter of rain on the shutter, and I am uneasy with the thrusting of green shoots outside in the night. So, my nerves sting at a spatter. I think spatter is onomatopoeia here. The sound that raindrops make when they hit a maybe tin surface, aluminum surface, like kind of like that. Um, and spatter is a word that really captures that effect when one hears that sound. Um, it is really kind of unnerving. The poet becomes uneasy shortly after hearing that, and I can relate to that. So I think that's good imagery as well. Thrusting of green shoots, of course, there's an image there. Um, Tense and urgent love in the very last lines. Tense love, urgent love, they're not usually adjectives that we're used to hearing about describing love. But I think it's an interesting choice of vocabulary by the author, which I will talk about when I am talking about the meanings of the poems. In terms of tools used for sights and sounds, now I'll be moving on to the second poem, Autumn. In Autumn, Amy Lowell uses some powerful images as well, actually. She starts off with the yellow dahlia, which is a beautiful flower, and in itself, it's a stunning image, but quilled to describe that feathery texture structure of that flower, I think quilled is a strong choice of words because it's an unusual adjective, but it really describes that kind of feel of the flower. Opulent, flaunting, again, interesting adjectives. Flaunting, I thought maybe personification for this instance because people are usually thought to flaunt their beauty or flaunt something, and when the yellow dahlia is flaunting its opulence, its rich smell, its beautiful sight, I guess. That like when it's flaunting, it's not really consciously doing it. It's not aware that it's flaunting. It's not able to be aware of it. So I just thought of that as a human trait. So I would think flaunting of the yellow dahlia would be personification. Um, and then Amy Lowell goes on to call the yellow dahlia round gold directly. There's no like or as, but the flower is being compared to round gold. So that's a metaphor right there. And round ripe gold flung out of a pale green stalk. I actually read that the wrong order, but so yes, the thing that's flung out of the pale green stalk is the yellow dahlia. That's a good description of how the flower actually evolves from the stalk. It's not a certain kind of tool, a literary tool, a figurative tool maybe, but it's a beautiful description. And then meticulously frilled and flaming, again, a beautiful image created in the reader's mind. A fireball of proclamation, that is definitely a metaphor, because the yellow dahlia is directly called a fireball of proclamation without any like or as. It's compared to the fireball, and it's an interesting description. Staring yellow, that's also interesting. I thought yellow can't stare because, well, obviously yellow doesn't have eyes with which it can stare, but also because colors don't stare, people stare. So I think that's also personification. It really brings the color yellow to life, and the yellow of the dahlia is a very energetic, lively yellow. So I think it's a very good description again, of course. Um, Barren, that word really stood out to me. I'm not sure why. It's not quite it's not quite a sight or a sound, but it's just a strong word to describe something. It's a very emotional word, I thought. Emotionally depressing, of course. Uh, in case of euphony, cacophony, rhythm, rhyme, both of these poems don't really follow a certain set rhyme scheme, but there is a certain rhythm to the poems with which the authors kind of communicate sound through. Um, Euphony, I think dahlia is a word that sounds very nice. I mean, not that it was used on purpose, I wouldn't know that, but I think it's a good choice of flower because the name sounds so good. Okay, I just spent 10 minutes talking about tools, which is way too long. I will move on to the meanings of the two poems. Vernal Equinox, well, of course, the topics are quite obvious. They're both about seasons, one spring, one autumn. But if you ask me, I believe both of them are more like winter or autumn, like in terms of emotions. I mean, the first poem, it's called Vernal Equinox, but it really, there's nothing in it that reminds me or is even remotely associated with the energy and the happiness and the livelihood and the positivity of spring. It's much more. Both of the poems are much more about lost love, loneliness, being alone, missing someone, being left all by yourself. So the first poem specifically, why are you not here to overpower me with your tense and urgent love? There's an obvious calling there, a longing for some presence of some overpowering love, which is not there. So the author is lonely and alone in springtime, which is supposed to be a happy time, as I said, but she's lost her love and misses him, I guess. Um, the same thing is apparent again in the same last lines of the second poem, which is Autumn, and the poet there, Amy Lowell, she says, "Shall I send it to you, you who have taken with you all I once possessed?" So there's again someone who's departed, who's left her, and taken some very important things, which I believe are her feelings of love and belonging with him. This person who's left has taken these things with him. She speaks again of lost love, and she's faced with a symbol of fertility, which is the dahlia, while she herself is barren. There's a contrast, a paradox there, which makes the poem even more sad. Maybe not depressing, but it's pretty sad. Um, do I like the poems? I do like the poems, actually, unlike any other Imagist poem, which so far I've not been a huge fan of the genre. But both of these poems I like because they're very ornate descriptions. I really love the imagery, not maybe not so much the sound, but the well, in the first one actually all senses. It appeals to all of my senses. The scent of hyacinths. I mean, the hyacinths are my favorite flower, and I can just see that pale mist of scent or an odor, and um, I think there are very nice descriptions of nature, which I have enjoyed reading. I think they're nice comparisons. And I like how the whole poem seems to be about completely something else, and then at the very end the feelings come in, and really what the author was trying to illustrate is more clear and vivid. But until then, it's just all about this one beautiful description, and then she ties it all in with the main message, with what she's actually trying to say. But that main message doesn't distract from the beauty of the writing of the poem. So that is why I actually do like these two poems. Um, okay, that's it. Bye.